The Darksiders series represents one of gaming's most ambitious narrative experiments. It's a franchise that attempted to build an entire mythology around the four horsemen of the apocalypse. For those unfamiliar, Darksiders is an action-adventure series that tries to blend elements from God of War's combat, Zelda's dungeon design, and its own unique take on apocalyptic lore. Each game follows a different horseman, war, death, and fury as they navigate the power struggles between heaven, hell, and the Charred Council. What makes this series fascinating, in my opinion, is just how wildly inconsistent it is. The first game, which released in 2010, introduced us to war and established a solid foundation, a revenge tale molded into some hack-and-slash combat and puzzle-solving dungeons. Then Darksiders 2 arrived and elevated literally everything, expanding the world, refining the gameplay, and delivering what I feel like is a very underrated action RPG. But then came Darksiders 3, which we'll get into that. In this video, I'm going to play through the entire mainline Darksiders series from start to finish, and together we'll experience all the highs and lows. So sit back, relax, and join me on this journey. Well, let's not waste any more time and get started, shall we? I bought the War Master edition of Darksiders on PS5. This comes with all the DLC and also a 60 FPS update, which is really nice. We have a decision to make: difficulty. Being past my prime in terms of reflexes, I chose to play on normal. I knew it would take me forever to get through this game if I didn't. To start, we get some really crucial backstory as setup, so pay attention if you're already dozing off. Essentially, heaven and hell have been in an endless war since the dawn of time. This war has been raging for so long that it eventually drew the attention of the Charred Council, an entity that's bound by some ancient laws to help preserve order and balance. Remember the word balance here, you'll be hearing it a lot for the next 2 hours or so. Basically, one side winning would be against the Charred Council's ultimate goal of keeping any great power from going unchecked. In order to maintain this balance, the council recruited some enforcers. We know them as the Four Horsemen. Disobeying the council meant a visit from one or all of the horsemen. As time went on, a new kingdom would emerge, the Kingdom of Man. The council deemed that the Kingdom of Man would eventually be integral to the balance, but for now they're far too weak. A truce was forged between heaven and hell, and this pact was bound by the Seven Seals. The Seven Seals are meant to be broken, but only when the Kingdom of Man was ready for the End War. This End War would establish some new balance and determine the fate of the three kingdoms, heaven, hell, and man. The seals breaking would also call the Four Horsemen to battle. We fast forward to present day and we're shown a news report. Meteors are hitting the earth, the military is attempting to extract civilians, and all hell is breaking loose. Among the rubble emerges an angel, and with him a massive demon. Humans are on the run, but many of them fall to the demon army. It's not long before we see our main character appear. In the first Darksiders, we play as War. War serves the council just like the other horsemen. He's also not a man of many words. We'll learn much more about War soon enough though. Thus begins our introduction to gameplay. Darksiders plays very similarly to games like the older God of War titles or Devil May Cry, for example. It's a button masher that also has a dodge and parry mechanic. We'll dig more into combat in a bit. Let's first try to understand what the hell is going on. Demons and angels are on Earth and War is fighting and killing soldiers from both sides. Remember, he's here for balance. What's weird is that War doesn't even understand what is going on. A loud horn knocks him out of his rage form and weakens his health bar. Right now we have a simple goal: follow this giant titan around as he clears the way for us. We clear out a few more demons and angels. Then we are introduced to our first traversal mechanic: demonic growth. War can attach to this and scale it with ease, whether it be on the side of a wall, the ceiling, or really wherever. We can also hang on these pipes or wires and move between platforms. The gameplay scenarios in Darksiders is pretty simple. Sometimes you'll enter a room and the exit will get blocked off, meaning you just entered what is a combat encounter and you'll need to kill every last enemy before you can continue. The other scenario are puzzles, which can be strangely difficult to solve, but we'll get there when it's time. We quickly clear out this room and move on. Back outside, the war rages on. We get introduced to a new mechanic here: the ability to pick up and throw objects, a powerful attack that we will be using often. One of the angels that we're about to fight makes an interesting comment. one of the horsemen, but where are his brothers? This should give us a hint. Why is this war happening if only one of the horsemen is here? Is this not the prophesized end war? Moving forward, we meet some new characters, specifically Abaddon, the leader of the Hellguard, an angelic army whose goal is to fight Hell directly. We also get a look at Uriel, Abaddon's enforcer, so to speak. Abaddon is also wondering what the hell is going on, mentioning the 7th seal. War strongly denies that the seal was ever broken, but everyone's just kind of blaming him at this point.
The 7th seal was not broken.
Abaddon!
We go up against the first boss fight, known as Straga, a giant demon that a normal approach would simply not work with. Remember that we can throw cars? We'll need to do this a few times while dodging his attacks. Eventually, he'll get stunned, freeing up some shots to his head. We don't actually get to kill him, however, instead he kind of just smushes us between his fingers. This sends us straight to the Charred Council, and they are absolutely pissed at War. In their eyes, War broke the law. War still believes the seal must have been broken, otherwise he would have no reason to be summoned. The Charred Council, however, sort of just asks him, well, where are the other horsemen in that case? The seals are hidden and kept away. There's just no way they could have been broken. In the council's eyes, War rode with the demonic army and doomed the kingdom of man by doing so. This led to the fall of Abaddon and in turn really threatens the balance that the council is so obsessed with. Because of this criminal act, War must be punished. However, War makes a plea. He wants to go back to Earth and destroy the ones responsible, including someone called the Destroyer. Try to stick with me here, it can get confusing. The Destroyer is sort of the leader of the demonic army for now. The council's like, okay, that's not a bad idea, but you will be watched the entire time you're on Earth, simply because War cannot be trusted. So, War gets a watcher bound to him. This thing is sort of like an extension of the council and will report back anything War does that might seem to be against the council's will. He's basically a snitch. To start this journey of vengeance, we need our sword, the Chaos Eater. Thank you, Council, for just giving me my weapon back just like that. Along with this, we get our first active ability, the Blade Geyser. This thing is super powerful and can be upgraded as we go. Souls in this game act as our currency, and Vulgrim is the merchant that we'll be buying things from. He sort of has a thing for souls. We'll be meeting him soon enough. We get thrown back to Earth, and the Watcher bound to us shows us how much power he really has.
Not so fast, horseman.
Basically being able to stop us in our tracks at any given moment. He lays down the ground rules and basically tells War that he's nothing more than a dog. Right now though, War just wants to clear his name, so he has to put up with this sort of treatment. Our first order of business is to find Vulgrim. It's crucial to note that it's been a really long time since War was imprisoned by the Charred Council. Earth is basically a battleground and humans have all but been eradicated at this point. Along the way to Vulgrim, we kill some demons, scale some walls, and we also get introduced to our first new enemy, this flaming giant who hits very hard. He takes quite a bit of hits to take down, and he also likes to explode when he dies. He gives us a ton of health, wrath, and souls for our efforts. Let's introduce some more mechanics. We can grab and move objects around. We will be doing this a lot as we go. We still haven't found Vulgrim, but we do have another new enemy. This giant blue demon with horns. This guy really hurts when he hits and has a mix of range and melee attacks. Anyway, he's dead, and we get a badass kill animation for our effort. The state of planet Earth is really bad, and the Crossroads area really drills that home. Demons have managed to build entire towers in the time that War was gone. Talk about efficiency. We finally meet Vulgrim, a serious staple. We'll be seeing him in all 3 games. As mentioned, he likes souls. After a brief feeding, he tells us that we can learn more about the Destroyer over in that massive tower in the distance. However, War is basically a shell of his former self. He doesn't have the power or capabilities to take the Destroyer down, and we can't even get in if we wanted. Vulgrim tells us he knows someone who can get us in, but first we need to get this guy 500 souls.
Feed my hunger, and I'll feed your curiosity.
What an absolute fiend. We get him his souls and he gives us some item. No idea what this is at this point, but it'll get us past some gates. Our goal now is to seek out Samael's prison. Samael is a demon and not one to take lightly. In fact, it's mentioned that he was a threat to the Dark Prince and is considered to be an enemy to the Destroyer. That's a lot of info, but we'll learn more soon. So that item that Vulgrim gave us is actually a horn. This horn is used to activate these wardens. The wardens are bound in service to the Destroyer, hence why they're blocking crucial passages, but once you wake them up, they basically come to their senses and let us pass. On to Samael's prison, we make it into an area called the Scalding Gallows. This area sort of serves as a hub, but it's also where we will find Samael. Along the way, we come across these red crystals that can't be broken, but eventually we'll get a power that allows us to pass through. But for now, we have no business here. I ended up getting enough souls while roaming around to buy a new item, the Scythe. Very fun weapon to use in combat. You'll be seeing me use it a ton. Anyway, we're almost at our destination, but this angry dude is in our way. He tells us that the Destroyer is aware of our presence and he's moving armies towards our position. We fight this mini boss named the Phantom General, and this guy ends up being a normal enemy as the game goes on. And he's dead. Finally, we meet Samael. Not sure how long he's been locked up, but he is not happy. He mentions that there's a way to take down the Destroyer, but first we'll need to get into his tower. This tower is guarded by 4 of his Chosen. Essentially, these Chosen are huge bosses that we'll need to take down. Samael wants their hearts, but we're not allowed to ask questions, so we kind of just go with it. First, we need to take down Tiamat over at the Twilight Cathedral. To actually reach her, we'll need to fly or at least float. Samael grants us wings that allow us to do just that. That was very kind of him. We make it to the Choking Grounds, and this is where we'll begin our journey to Tiamat. I love the vibe of this place. Blocking our path inside the cathedral is another warden. We wake it up, but this time it has a request. See, this warden is stuck and cannot move unless we break the curse holding it in its place. To do so, we need to go to the Shadow Realm. War used to be able to do this willingly, but not so much since we've lost our power. Thankfully, the warden can take us there too. Now would be a good time as ever to explain how Darksiders sets up their missions. There are many times where we need to go and grab 3 or 4 pieces of an item, or close 4 gates, or kill 4 enemy types. I think you see where I'm going with this. This mission is the first of many right now. We need to close these 4 shadow gates. These gates transport us to combat arenas, and each arena has a certain scenario that we need to complete. In this first gate, we need to kill 5 enemies in midair. In Arena 2, we need to kill 40 enemies within a time limit. In the third one, we need to kill 50 enemies while the room fills with poison. And finally, we need to execute 30 enemies within the time limit. That's 4 gates down, so we can head back to the Warden. The curse is broken, and he gets out of the way. We also get our first weapon enhancement. These are passive buffs that augment your capabilities in some form or fashion. Some will increase damage, others will increase how much wrath or souls you get from each kill. Not a crazy in-depth system, but a nice addition. Anyway, let's proceed. We need to get to Tiamat and get her still beating heart. A blue gate stands in our way. To get through this, we'll need a Beholder's Key. This mechanic is prominent for the first 2 games. Find a nearby chest, get the key, and we're good to go. Now this marks our first real encounter with the Hell's Guard, specifically Uriel. You might remember that she was Abaddon's enforcer in the opening of the game. They've been looking for war and they finally found him. This takes us to one of the longest but most fun sections of the game. We take control of a griffin and fly through a destroyed city while we pick off angels with our newfound friend. This is a great way to farm souls, and it's honestly such a nice switch up from the button mashing. Eventually, we do run into some demons as well, but there's simply no match for the firepower. And look at that, we land right at the doorstep of the Twilight Cathedral. How convenient. Again, I just love the vibes here. Inside, we find a glowing sword. We need to mount the sword onto different statues that allow us to access doorways like this one. We also get a look at Tiamat trying to kill our angelic beast. Poor thing, man. At this point, there are a number of puzzles to clear and enemies to kill. I won't be showing all that, otherwise this video would be twice as long as it already is. So, some highlights. We finally learn what breaks those red crystals. It's these red bombs that blow up after a few seconds. You simply just grab and throw them, but don't hold on to them for too long. We meet this new enemy type who is cladded in some heavy armor, and he actually takes forever to kill, but the cool part is seeing his armor flying off as you hit him. Very nice touch. we do some more puzzle solving and come across this strange device. These things always hold new powers or items for us to use. This particular one had the crossblade, our first ranged weapon that'll be useful in puzzle solving and picking off enemies from a distance. It doesn't do crazy damage, but it's good for downing flying enemies. You can also imbue the crossblade with fire by aiming at a flame and letting it pass through the target. Now it's worth mentioning that about 50% of this game, if not more, is all about puzzle solving. It's not something I expected when I first started, but every time I came across one, I knew I had to lock in. Some actually required some complex solutions, namely the ones towards the end game where you have a ton of powers at your disposal. Anyway, eventually we come across a boss fight, and in this fight we need to use our crossblade effectively while dishing out damage to any adds. It's not a hard fight at all, and I wrapped it up pretty quickly. There's still a lot left to do in this cathedral, so for your sake, let's fast forward a bit. We unlock one final door and make our way up to this giant tower, and there she is, Tiamat in all her glory. She's aware that we might be working with Samael, but that doesn't change anything. This fight asks that we use our crossblade and one of those bombs. Took me a few times to get this right with the finicky aim, and I'll admit I did get a bit frustrated and died a few times as well. The fight itself though is pretty cool. I like the scope of the whole thing, and the rainy weather added to the intense vibe. Eventually though, we do take Tiamat down, but being one of the destroyers chosen, she offers a chance to make any wish we want in exchange for her life. War asks if she can restore the balance, and she just laughs in his face. How embarrassing. Anyway, he rips out her heart, and it's time to head back to our boy Samael. We actually don't have a way to get back, considering our angelic beast was eaten by Tiamat. However, Vulgrim tells us of a new way to travel. That way is called serpent holes. Yes, serpent holes. These are ways to get from one main area to another, and they prove to be very useful. Before we go, I hit up the shop and see what new powers Vulgrim has waiting for us. I got some money to spend, and we serpent hole our way back to Samael. We give Samael the heart, and he tells us the location of the second chosen, the Griever. Apparently, he chills within the tunnels underground, but first we need to deal with someone named Ulthane, an old one. We're gonna learn a ton more about the old ones in Darksiders 2, so let's put that book back on the shelf for now. Samael, for some reason, tries to convince War to kill the Watcher, who is bound to War, so that War can once again understand his own power. War literally smashes the Watcher, and Samael celebrates this. Not exactly sure what happened here, but the Watcher wakes up and we all act like nothing ever happened. This whole thing basically leads to us having the ability to use our Chaos form, a strong state where we can literally just plow through enemies big and small with little trouble for a limited time. Anyway, we need to find Ulthane now. We eventually make it to the Drowned Pass. By the way, War can swim, and he's pretty damn good at it too. In the Drowned Pass, there is another warden blocking the gates. You're not gonna believe this, but this warden is also cursed and needs us to go into the Shadow Realm to break it. Yep, 4 shadow gates for us to complete. There's 1, there's 2, 3, and finally 4. Get out of the way, buddy. We need to go find Ulthane. We got some more swimming and climbing to do, but eventually we get where we need to be. Anvil's Ford. Shout out to the level designers in this game, man. Some places just look so good. Anyway, Anvil's Ford is where Ulthane hangs out with his giant hammer. Pause if you need to. He's not entirely friendly, seeing as we're just a stranger pulling up to his sanctuary.
You best not go touching that one ain't yours.
We call him by his nickname, and this sets him off for some reason, starting basically what's another boss fight. The fight is cut short, however, because Uriel and the Hellguard show up. She wants War to pay for what he's done. She thinks he's responsible for triggering the End War. Unfortunately for the Hellguard, they're stuck on Earth and cannot get back to their home in the White City as long as the Destroyer is out and about. Ulthane isn't a big fan of the Angels, and this sets in motion a fun little section of the game where we compete with him to see who can kill the most. You'll also notice that Ulthane can smash through these blue crystals that were once impeding our path. It's not exactly clear where we're headed, but this is a particularly lengthy section. Eventually, the level totally switches. We continue down the path, but we're split up and I'm quickly overwhelmed. Now, if you've played this game before, you're probably screaming at your TV or monitor because I missed a crucial weapon. Thankfully, it's not far away. Some angels use these cannons, and surprise, we're also able to wield them. Without this, there's just no way I could complete the section. So Darksiders now turns into a third-person shooter. Anyway, I ended up beating Ulthane 50 to 28, but I did use a weapon of mass destruction. In the very next room, Uriel is waiting for us. She really just wants to kill war. This is a legit boss fight, but it wasn't too difficult. Uriel moves fast and has a variety of attacks, but her damage isn't too hard hitting, so we can withstand some of her hits. Eventually, we take her down, but her angels carry her away to safety. We still want to get to the Griever's lair, and Ulthane provides us with the path to get there. Thankfully, the Griever isn't too far. We run into him pretty early in the next area, and we also happen to have a minigun at our disposal. As you might expect, we use it to shoot the blue crystal on its stomach. It doesn't take too long to get rid of it, but this was basically a preview of the fight. The real one is still a bit away, so we gotta have a little bit of patience here. We get our usual mix of puzzles and smaller combat sections, but as previously mentioned, the more powers we get, the more difficult these puzzles become. Anyway, we destroy some red crystals, kill some enemies, swim underwater, and we find another one of those floating devices. Smashing it reveals a new weapon, one that will allow us to destroy those annoying blue crystals, and also dish out some heavy damage in combat. The Gauntlet. It's a solid weapon that I often use when fighting stronger enemies for knockback purposes. Now that we have this new power, it'll be a common aspect of our puzzle solving repertoire. Traversing through the subway, we'll get interrupted by the Griever's giant claws smashing through the concrete from time to time. We're getting closer and closer. We also get introduced to a new enemy type. This dual blade wraith that attacks fast and hurts quite a bit. Gotta be careful against these, but thankfully the gauntlet we picked up is perfect for knocking them down. We finally make it to the Griever, but this fight isn't what you think it is. It's not a straight up melee battle. Instead, it's one where you need to strategically use these blue crystals while smashing an empty train cart right into it. Doing so drops the Griever to its knees, allowing you to hit the blue crystal with your gauntlet. Doing this 4 times is enough to end the fight. It's a very easy fight, and we got another one of those Chosen's hearts. Before going back to Samael, we make a pit stop at Ulthane and try to interrogate him a bit. See, being an old one means he would likely hang out where the old ones are, and it's far from here. He's in exile, and he's the only one of his kind here. To this point, War wonders if he played a role in bringing the End War. He doesn't exactly answer the question. Instead, he gives us a gun and we go on our merry way with our questions still unanswered. We stop at Volgrim to grab some upgrades, and it's time to head to Samael. We ask Samael about Uriel, the Helgard lady that seems to not want to leave us alone. She's on a warpath to avenge her fallen leader, Abaddon, but that's all we really get out of that. Nothing we don't already know at this point. What we learn, however, is that Straga is the one who killed Abaddon and that he's the strongest of the 4 chosen. He draws power directly from the tower, or does he? Anyway, our next goal is to get to the Stygian, a massive ancient worm that's been plaguing an area called the Ashlands. There are many demons in the area who are either imprisoning or capturing lesser worms, but crossing the Ashland where the worms roam isn't so simple, since they'll kill just about anything that's actually on the ground. This is where we get a new power, the ability to use chronospheres. These allow us to slow down time while we move at our normal speed. You might see where this is going. Yep, we'll be using the chronospheres to cross the Ashlands. Let's head on over. So to activate a chronosphere, we need to use our crossblade. Hitting a chrono crystal slows down time. There's no shortage of platforming puzzles for us to complete on the way there, but let's fast forward a little bit. We make it to the Ashland, and there just happens to be a giant worm patrolling the area, waiting for someone or something to touch the sand. This guy is gonna haunt us for pretty much the whole level, hence the chronosphere is hanging in a few different locations. I do like how each area in this game introduces a new mechanic to the mix. Definitely helps in keeping things fresh. Working through the Ashlands is tough. Everything wants to kill you, but to an even greater extent. It's fine though, we climb some towers, kill some demons, and find ourselves in a shooting gallery area. It cracks me up when the game just turns into a third-person shooter out of absolutely nowhere, but I'll never get tired of it. Plus, look at all the souls that I'm racking up. Our whole mission right now is to get to some sort of gladiator arena. And here is where we come across our first horseman. Using the gun here is crucial, and keeping my distance was the name of the game. This whole arena section goes on for quite a bit, but eventually this dude on a red horse shows up. Is that my horse, bro? Where has my horse been this whole time? We knock this dude off the horse, then kill him in some melee action. We then get to the scene where the horse keeps attacking us. The Watcher wants us to kill it, but War refuses because he knows that it's Ruin. And now that they're reunited, we can fight on horseback in the areas that allow it. Ruin is not only fun to get around with, but he's also crucial for the fights against these giant worms, since he's fast enough to help keep our distance. We ran into that worm that we avoided at first. This time we can actually kill it. While on Rune, we can use our gun to fire shots into the worm's weak spot. Doing this enough times eventually kills the damn thing. We get ourselves into another one of those shooting gallery sections, but we're getting pretty close to the Stygian. We finally reach him and he's bound by many chains. Somehow he breaks free and thus begins the third boss fight with another Chosen. This fight is pretty damn similar to the one we just had with the other giant worm, except we need to use melee to knock off this metal armor hiding its face. Doing so will expose a weak spot similar to the other worm. It's a decent fight, but honestly it's too similar to the one we already had. Anyway, War grabs the third heart. And it's time to head back to Samael. There he is, just eating away like a maniac. We just have one more heart to grab, then we get to go into the tower. The final Chosen is Silitha. If that sounds like a giant spider's name, you're right, because it is. We make it to Silitha's realm, and it's absolutely filled with webbing. Disgusting, but honestly, it still looks pretty cool. War can rip through these webs, which is kind of nice, but we can't take out these shelled spiders hanging out on the ceilings yet, so there are certain rooms that we just cannot go into or it's instant death for us. We go through a number of puzzles and beat down a bunch of spiders and demons, and there it is, another one of those floating things. This time around, we get a chain. This chain allows us to remove the shells of the bigger spiders. Remember the ones that we couldn't take out? Well, now they're going to be pieces of cake for us. We can also use the chain to get around areas that were once inaccessible and swing around to these hooks. We need to eliminate 4 of those hard shell spiders. We've already killed one after getting this new item, so we got 3 more to go. Killing them all will open up a locked doorway. There goes spider number 2, there's spider number 3, and finally spider number 4. We can't go through that door yet because if you didn't notice, there's still a giant spider symbol on it. This isn't Silitha, it's just another big ass spider. This fight requires us to take these cocoons or whatever these web things are and throw it at the spider's mouth when it's sucking in air. What this does is essentially distract it, allowing us to go in and use our gauntlet to knock off the blue crystal armor. With that done, we can finally go through the door. On our way to this realm's Chosen, we fight some seriously tough groups of enemies, we solve some more puzzles, and kill more demons. Some of these combat encounters really take some time, but having upgraded my health through life stones scattered in these different realms and within these chests, I've been able to withstand a ton of damage. We finally make it to Silitha, and she tells us quite a different story. Are you ready for this? Turns out the 4 Chosen do not guard the tower. They quite literally have nothing to do with the tower. Instead, the reason they all had those black beating hearts was to prevent Samael's return. So, we may have kind of messed up here. It doesn't matter to War though, he doesn't really believe her anyway. The fight involves us having to use the new chain we acquired, and we do this by hooking onto her since she's always trying to keep her distance. She eventually climbs onto the ceiling, and we need to use these grapple points to get close to her and knock her off. Doing so ends the boss fight as War takes her heart. Now it's time to return to Samael and give him the final heart. We can use Rune to traverse these open areas much quicker. Okay, we get him the final heart, Samael demands it, but War confronts him about being lied to about the Chosen and how they never actually guarded the tower. Regardless, War gives him the final heart and Samael reacts as expected. He tells us he can crush us, but also interestingly respects the fact that we're on a quest for revenge.
I recognize a quest for revenge when I see one, and revenge I respect.
It turns out Samael challenged the Destroyer, which I can only assume is why he ended up in prison. He doesn't clearly tell us why he did it, but tells us to continue our quest in order to find out. He opens up a portal and War willingly goes into it. War is just very strangely trusting, isn't he? I'm not entirely sure what Samael plans to do with these 4 hearts now that he has them, but anyway, we get transported to a new area called the Black Throne. In other words, we are at the tower. Here, we come across Azrael, the Angel of Death. He reiterates to us that the 7th seal wasn't broken and still asks for our help. He tells us that a gate must be shut. What gate that is isn't clear right now, but he does tell us that the Destroyer draws his power from the Well of Souls. This well fuels the Destroyer's army. War questions this, wondering how the Angel of Death would allow the Destroyer to take control of the well. Azrael tells us that the Destroyer sent the mightiest of his chosen against him, Straga to be exact. War is willing to help Azrael as long as he can take him directly to Straga. Now Azrael is stuck. He's basically imprisoned by these 3 floating heads, keeping him in place, and we need to remove them. Alright, this section of the game is incredibly lengthy and requires some long and at times frustrating puzzle solving. Essentially, we'll need to direct a blue beam from 3 different areas to these 3 floating heads. To do this, we'll need a new item, one that we grab from this floating device after clearing out a bunch of enemies. This item is basically like a portal device. We're able to open portals and close portals as long as they're on these orange windows. This ability is called Voidwalker, and it's crucial for getting around as well as completing many puzzles in this location. Now each beam we need is guarded by these constructs, and we'll need to use our newfound ability to shoot ourselves in the sky and land on the construct's head, striking its weak spot. We do this 3 times and it finally goes down. Now we have access to the beautiful and wonderful blue beam. We just have to get it back to where the Angel of Death was imprisoned. This is a long process, so I won't put you through it, but here's a preview of what it's like. We kill the second Guardian for the second beam and bring it back to the main area. Triggering the second floating head takes us into a cutscene. Azrael tells us that the universe is sick, but the Charred Council doesn't want to admit it, so this portion reveals a ton. Azrael and Abaddon colluded to attack the Dark Kingdom without the Council's approval. Azrael is against this initially, mentioning that the Kingdom of Man isn't ready for the End War and that breaking the 7th seal would cause untold amounts of destruction. The Council would have to punish this treacherous act since they're attempting to break the pact that was forged so long ago. Ulthane would help in reforging the seals as if they were never broken, allowing Heaven to attack an unprepared demon army and getting rid of the evidence before the Council even knew. So, Abaddon and Azrael broke 6 seals, leaving 1 unharmed in order to not involve the Horsemen. The Watcher accuses Azrael of treason and orders War to destroy the traitors. War denies this request, telling him that now that the source of this act is known, his service to the Council is done.
Fool! You deny the will of the Council?
You heard the Angel's confession. My service to the Council is ended.
The Watcher, of course, doesn't allow this and tells War that he needs to keep his end of the bargain and take down the Destroyer. We got 1 more Guardian to kill and 1 more beam to redirect. Down goes the Guardian and in goes the beam. Azrael is now free and opens up a portal to get to Straga. He mentions that without him, we'd be stuck here even after we defeat Straga, so Azrael must live. We head down to finally fight the man of the hour, Straga himself. This is an awesome fight, but the mechanics are relatively simple. Using the Voidwalker power, we need to open up a portal on the floor and 1 on his sword so that when he pulls his sword back over his head, we can land and hit a weak spot. In between these moments, we need to clear some ads and dodge some big attacks that hurt quite a bit. We do this 3 times, with the 3rd and final strike being enough to kill Straga for good. Azrael shows up and he gets us out of there, keeping his promise and transporting us to a new location that we haven't been to before. This place is called Eden. Azrael tells us how he saw Abaddon after he fell in battle and brought him here to Eden. The Watcher mentions that Eden should not exist anymore after the first humans were cast out. We're talking biblical terms here at this point. Azrael tells us that he refused to let Heaven's first gift just rot, so he hid Eden away. Eden houses something very important and central to the story, this being the Tree of Knowledge. Azrael tells us that if there's any way to stop the Destroyer, the tree would be the one to provide that information. War asks if Abaddon had also been to the tree, and it's clear that he has. However, Azrael mentions that the tree gives everybody a different vision. Many are affected in a multitude of ways, some go insane, and some might receive nothing. Eden looks pretty damn nice, if I say so myself. As we're strolling about here, we come across a bridge that we cannot cross. At this moment, Azrael tells us that we've been fighting the darkness for so long that we've been marked by it, and the only way to proceed would be to kill that darkness. So that's what we do. We fight a shadow version of ourselves, exact same moveset and all. Killing him allows us to use a new ability, one that allows us to traverse the shadow realm freely. We finally made it to the tree, and in it we see a vision of Abaddon talking to Uriel. A quick glimpse of the war shows us the exact moment that Abaddon fell. He's wondering how they knew. They, I'm assuming, being the demons. In this darkness, Abaddon is talking to someone, but it's not clear who. The woman seemed to be aware of Heaven's plan for this assault, and she took advantage of his scheme. She offers Abaddon the choice to join the dark side and to become the destroyer, and he resisted for about 1 second, then gave in. Now Abaddon is and has been the destroyer. He is asked to return to Azrael and convince him to help as well. We also get a vision of the Charred Council discussing these events. They feel that Abaddon is moving too freely and just flat out breaking the law. The council wants to stop Abaddon, but they cannot send all 4 horsemen. They cannot break the seal. So they decided to send only one, the one whose only purpose is to seek vengeance. So they picked war. Abaddon guards the 7th seal, but he mentions something specific. He says the blade is scattered, but what blade is he talking about exactly? We don't know yet. The Watcher somehow enters our vision and impales us with our own sword. I'm not sure what the significance of this was, maybe to show us that the council is done with war for one reason or another. Anyway, we find ourselves back in Eden with a wealth of new knowledge. We head back to Azrael and share what we learned. Abaddon is the destroyer, but he only became one because he was betrayed and nothing more than a pawn in this whole scheme. We learn that the blade briefly mentioned is the Armageddon blade. This blade has been scattered across different areas in the realms, and we need to piece it back together. It's the only blade capable of stopping Abaddon, and Ulthane is the only one who can reassemble that blade. We just need to find all the pieces. So to do this, we'll need to head back to all the areas we've already been to, but make sure to walk in the Shadow Realm as that's where Abaddon hid them. So here we go. Conveniently, the first piece is in the realm we're already in. We'll skip past grabbing the other 5 and just get the final piece here. We get the last piece and off to Ulthane we go. He once again forges together the Armageddon blade for us, but this time it's for a different reason. We head back to Azrael and he tells us that Abaddon and the Hellguard are already at war. We head up there to kind of see what's going on, and it turns out the Destroyer has killed Uriel and asks War to join him in the fight against Heaven. Just kidding, Uriel's not dead, and as you might expect, War declines this invitation. Well, here we go, the final fight of the game. Using Rune is absolutely crucial because the fight is basically jousting. We need to knock Abaddon down, and this is done by tripping him up. Once he hits the ground, it's time to unleash some strikes. Phase 2 of this fight takes place on this floating platform. This time we fight Abaddon in his angel form. He's quick and he hurts, but this fight isn't too difficult. He has some different moves like floating into the sky and hurling fireballs at us, and his sword strikes hurt the most, but getting him into these QTE events 3 times spells the end of the fight. Down goes Abaddon, and War kills him for good.
It is not for duty that I kill you now.
The 7th seal is right there, but the Watcher appears again, crippling War and telling him how the council played him to do their bidding. The Watcher takes the seal, as breaking it would unleash the 4 horsemen, which at this point would be really bad for the council if they all learn exactly what they've been plotting. Uriel stabs War in the back, completing the death oath that the two agreed to in their first meeting. This ends up freeing War from the Watcher's grasp, and he's finally able to kill him.
Forget who holds the leash.
I haven't forgotten.
And in War's possession now is the 7th seal. Uriel questions why War spared her to begin with way back during their first meeting, but he responds by telling her that he would not want to kill Heaven's last champion. She lets War know that he'll be hunted forever by the White City, the Council, and by others. To this, War responds by saying he won't be facing it alone, breaking the 7th seal and calling on his horseman brothers. And that is the end of Darksiders 1. With Darksiders 1 complete, it's time to get started on Darksiders 2. So I bought the definitive edition of this game, comes with a complete DLC set, and can be played at 4K 60 frames per second, which is great considering just how good some of the locations in this game look. There are a number of difficulty choices to choose from, but just as I did for the first game, I'll be playing on normal here, so let's get started. Like the first game, we get some backstory. Since we've played through the first one, we know a bit of this information already, 3, the Charred Council exists only to maintain balance in the universe, but the balance had been broken. It's important to understand, as I mentioned in my opening, that the Darksider game stories happen in parallel, which I find to be really interesting. Instead of being a direct sequel and a continuation of where War left off, Darksiders 2 and Darksiders 3 coexist in that same timeline. In the opening of Darksiders 2, it's mentioned that Earth is in ruins and the Destroyer is carving out a new kingdom, blaming War for triggering the apocalypse. Therefore, at this point, we don't know that War has essentially killed the Destroyer, but what we do get is more backstory on the Horsemen themselves and who they are. See, the Horsemen are a race of Nephilim, a race born due to an unholy union between angel and demon. The Nephilim are a strong race and can conquer and destroy worlds with relative ease. It's mentioned, however, that 4 amongst them grew tired of the endless slaughter and feared that if left unchecked would be a threat to a balance. So, the 4 made a truce with the Charred Council, and for their service, they would gain unimaginable power. With their newfound power, the first task of the 4 horsemen was to slay their own kind, to go on and kill all the Nephilim who have been threatening the balance. Now we move forward to what is the present day in the Darksiders universe. War is professing his innocence to the Charred Council, kept prisoner at this time, and we meet the main character of this game, Death, who is on a mission to save his brother. To gain his brother's freedom, Death swore that he would resurrect humanity. However, Death doesn't really know how to go about doing this, so our first mission is to find someone called the Keeper of Secrets. Honestly, who better to talk to at this point? This time around, we have our horse from the start, making these long sections in the open world much easier to get through. We also get our first taste of combat, which you can already probably tell is much faster than the first game. Death is more agile and attacks a lot quicker. There are many notable differences from the get-go. Death has a primary and secondary weapon, there's an equipment system, Death has greater platforming ability that we did not see at all during War's campaign. To say that I was loving these changes would be an understatement. We also pretty quickly come across our first boss fight, the Ice Giant. I think as a viewer, it's easy to see the difference between the first 2 titles, and once we get to the third game, you'll see another big change. Whether that change is good or bad is up for discussion, however. Anyway, let's get to the Keeper of Secrets. We climb up what feels like a never-ending mountain, but eventually we make it to the Crowfather, or Keeper of Secrets. The Crowfather ain't looking too good. He's complaining about voices always being in his head, tormenting him non-stop. Death asks for help, but the Crowfather refuses, mentioning that the other time he helped Death led him to the current state of endless torment. The Crowfather mentions that he's aware of War's imprisonment and impending judgment by the Charred Council. Death mentions that the Crowfather probably really knows what actually happened. However, he responds by saying whatever he knows won't prove War's innocence. But remember, Death is here to try and restore humanity, and that's what he actually wants to know the secrets to. The Crowfather mentions that the idea is complete madness, but if there were a way to restore humanity, then that knowledge would exist at the Tree of Life. Death wants to enter the portal that the Crowfather shows him, but the Crowfather wants to strike a deal. First, get rid of this amulet given to him by Death. Death refuses this, stating that in exchange for the secrets that amulet holds, he would hold onto the amulet for good. This ends up leading to a fight, one where we fight what is essentially an apparition of War. There's something to be said about the improved combat in Darksiders 2. Even the boss fights are way more fun in my opinion. Anyway, we kill this fake War, who you might have guessed was actually the Crowfather. Death demands he opens the portal, but he ends up killing him in the process. The Crowfather dies, and the amulet breaks into pieces and lodges into Death's chest. This leads to a cutscene where it's implied that Death had been sent to a world that was on the brink of annihilation, a world that was near the end of its life and heading into the abyss. Death wakes up in a completely new location, known as the Forge Lands. In it awaits an old one who mentions that Death being here is a bad omen. Death wants to get down to brass tacks here. He asks where he can find the Tree of Life, but the old one responds by saying that this world is dying, specifically due to spreading corruption. That's going to be the key word of Darksiders 2. Corruption. We randomly enter a fight during this conversation. A construct forms out of nowhere, but the point of this is to communicate just how bad the corruption is. After killing a few corrupted warriors, we're talking to the old one again. He mentions that the corruption that's spreading cannot be beaten with just a blade. Instead, he tells us to seek out the Forge Sister and ask about the fire of the mountain. She'll be able to help us reach the tree. I just want to take a moment and give a shout out to just how nice the world looks in this game. I know we're just getting started here, but it really is a treat to move through this world. It has a much different vibe from the other two Darksiders games. Anyway, we find the Forge sister. She goes by Isla and she runs this forge. We learn about something called the Maker's Forge, which was once responsible for crafting the kingdoms of hell, heaven, building cities, towers, and literally everything in between. Essentially, this race of people we're talking to are completely ancient and are responsible for shaping the worlds that the series takes place in. The Maker's Forge, however, doesn't work because the fire of the mountain and the tears of the mountain no longer flow into it, so it's kind of useless. I think you see what might be going on here, right? What does this have to do with the tree that we're seeking, though? Well, it turns out that we're kind of stuck here until we get the forge working again. She mentions that before the forge was lost, the makers crafted a colossus to fight back against the corruption, but to actually awaken the colossus, we need a maker's key, and the maker's key can only be forged on the maker's forge. Are you still with me here? Because that definitely was some confusing writing, but anyway, we need to head out and find a location called the Cauldron. That was a ton of setup, but it should be noted that Darksiders 2 is definitely the most lore heavy of the series. Alright, off to the Cauldron. Darksiders 2 is very different from the first game in the sense that this game is more of an open world. It has a bunch of optional content to do, dungeons to explore, and side missions to knock out. But I'll remain focused on the main story for this playthrough. Upon entering this giant field, we see a massive eye that we can only assume is the corruption that's blocking the path to the tree. Yeah, we can't do anything about this right now. Let's head on over and see if we can get the fire flowing again. Oh look, it's our old pal Volgrim. This time around, he's not obsessed with souls. Instead, he's a real businessman dealing in gold and boatman coins. He doesn't actually sell new moves like he did in the first game. Instead, he sells these boxes which contain a randomly rolled item of a certain rarity. Yeah, Darksiders 2 has quite a bit of looting involved, and it's a huge departure from the one weapon only thing that the first game had going for it. Personally, I like the change. We make it to our location, and just outside of it is another maker who's fighting off corrupted constructs. We help him out a little bit and have a quick convo. This guy's name is Karn, and this is not the last time we'll run into him at all. He'll often have side quests for us to look out for in various dungeons that we enter. Let's head on in. Darksiders 2 is structured a bit differently from the first game. It still has a number of different puzzles and combat sections, but the areas you explore or the dungeons you find yourself in are much larger, with many side areas and off the beaten path places to go. The majority of your time spent is in these dungeons, and each one will have a different theme. We're here to restore the fire, so as you might expect, we're dealing with a ton of lava. Like the first game, there are these explosive objects that you can throw to blow certain things up. In this game, it'll mainly be used to clear up corruption. I do like that these things do not explode after a few seconds, allowing us to carry them as long as we want. Also, like the first game, we'll need to open certain doors with the beholder keys. These are often hidden in far-off chests that require some fighting or platforming to get to. Darksiders 2 has far more platforming sections than the first game, like probably 3 times as much if I had to guess. I didn't mind it though. The way death controls is pretty fluid outside of some areas where things did get frustrating. Anyway, we do some climbing, some wall running, and some killing. I should also mention that death has 2 skill trees, and this game has a more traditional leveling system. It's XP based, and once the bar at the top fills up, you basically gain a skill point. The first one didn't really have a skill system at all. Death can be played as either a necromancer or as someone who dishes out big damage with a single skill. I decided to go the necromancer route because it seemed like it was an interesting mechanic to have skeletons and bats doing the fighting for you. As we get further into the game, you'll see why I don't regret this choice at all. It's in this area we meet a new enemy type, the Stalker. Man, these guys are tough and take a really long time to kill. It's also funny watching enemies fight each other. I love when games do that. Anyway, the Stalker is down. In this dungeon, we come across our first puzzle-solving mechanic, placing these giant balls with runes carved into them onto these platforms. We will be doing this a lot. And hey look, we got our first boss. His name is Garn. This dude hits hard, but honestly, he's no match for me and my skeleton army of 2. Goodbye, Garn. Well, turns out he was the one thing standing between us and reactivating this giant cauldron. Now, for the record, there was a ton that I personally did not show for the sake of time. I'm only highlighting the key points here. Alright, we pop the cap and the fire is flowing once again. Let's head back to Isla. The game does have a fast travel system that can be accessed by the map at any time, so that's a real help. We see the fire flowing back at the base, and for our efforts, we're rewarded with a gun. And this isn't just any gun, this is our brother Strife's. It's not clear how or why it's here, but we'll just take it. Isla also acts as a merchant where we can buy and sell items to our heart's content. Anyway, we need to get the tears flowing again. We meet Karn on the way there, and he tells us that the tears are located in an area called the Drench Fort, which is honestly pretty fitting. And we're here. It looks pretty nice, doesn't it? We roll some balls around, pull some levers to get the water flowing, kill some bad guys, blow up some corruption, and run into a boss. Darksiders 1 had what I would call gimmick bosses, where instead of a straight up melee fight, there would be some trick you would need to pull off or some mechanic to do in order to actually damage the boss. Darksiders 2 also has a few, like this giant crab. The goal here is to roll these giant balls into the crab, knocking it over and giving you a chance to deal some damage. The ball ends up releasing a mini crab when it explodes, but they don't really pose much of a threat. Strangely, I did die a few times despite the mechanics being relatively simple and the crab's attacks being super telegraphed. Anyway, it's dead. Each time we kill one of these named bosses, we usually get a really cool item that's pretty damn OP. You better believe I use this hammer eventually when I hit level 7. Alright, we pull this lever to get the water flowing. And now it's time to head back to the forge. This time around, we head into the Maker's Forge. It's up and running, and the Makers waste little to no time forging the Master's Key. They're very serious about clearing this corruption. We'll also be needing this key to activate the Colossus. The Elder tells us that we need to find a construct who has not yet fallen to corruption. This construct will lead us to the foundry where the guardian that we need to use the key on is hanging out at. There's a bit of extra info we can get out of the Elder, and it relates directly to the first Darksiders. Remember those wardens that were blocking certain pathways we needed to blow a horn to get them out of the way? Well, the Elder tells us they were called once the seals were broken and that only one warden remains, the one that will be leading us into the foundry. So we actually learned that those wardens were built by these makers. Pretty interesting. Anyway, let's go find this warden. Getting to this warden is not an easy feat. In fact, it required killing some bad guys and solving more puzzles. Generally speaking, the puzzles in this game are much easier than the ones in the first one that I had to solve. I mean, there were times where I spent like 15 to 20 minutes on a solution in the first game. Maybe the devs had gotten some feedback or something. Anyway, we make it to the temple, and outside Karn is asking for another favor. To find his compass. Listen, buddy, if I find it while I'm in there, then it's all yours, but I'm not gonna go looking for it. The Lost Temple is freaking massive. It's basically another dungeon in the same way the Fire and Tier 1s were. This temple does have a cool new mechanic where you can actually ride one of these magically powered constructs and use them to punch through these corruption stones. We face a new enemy type here, these giant floating faces, not too difficult to deal with now that we have our gun. We then use a construct to create a rope for us to walk across. Remember, our goal here is to find the one warden who hasn't been called to service by the destroyer. Look at this view, man, it's beautiful. We encounter the boss of this dungeon, the Construct Hulk. This fight has some interesting mechanics going on. At first, I thought I could just damage him, but what this fight actually requires is taking these bombs that fall from the ceiling when the boss smashes the ground. We scoop them up and chuck them at the boss. This gives us a chance to damage his weak spots, and he's dead. We get a cool new weapon for beating him too. This opens up the path to the warden. Remember, we'll be needing him to get us to the foundry where the Guardian is located. The construct walks us back to the main hub, which was pretty convenient. I decide to spend some more skill points, specifically so that my skeletons explode when they die. This was a great skill. And I also equip our new weapon. We meet back up with the Elder, and he tells us that the Tree of Life is actually a gateway that connects all the different realms. But we really need to awaken the Guardian first. We talk to the Warden once again and get some more backstory about where we're going. The Foundry is like a holy site where soul and stone fuse together, but it's marred by darkness and corruption, so it's become our job to bring it back to its former self. The Warden opens up the path for us, and Karn decides to join us on this quest. Inside the Foundry, as one might expect by now, there is a ton of platforming puzzles to conquer and some combat encounters to clear. Karn joins us for this whole dungeon, and he's super helpful, holding doors open and throwing us around when needed. We come across the Guardian, and yeah, if there's anything that's going to clear corruption, it's probably going to be this giant thing. Karn tells us that the stone is finished, but the Guardian still needs life. We have to provide the essence of a maker's heart. And there are 3 hearts within this temple, so we gotta go find them. In this same temple, we come across a handy new traversal power, the Death Grip. This will allow us to swing across different holding points, and we saw something like this in the first game as well. Finally, we find the first Heartstone, very blue and very shiny. We just need to get it down, and that's one. Bringing it back to the Guardian has it fall perfectly into place, but we still got 2 more to go. Alright, here's the second one. The third one looks a little weird, it's kind of green, potentially corrupted, but hey, I'm not an expert. The construct we took on the way to get here ends up absorbing some of the corruption that the stone was radiating. This ends up being a boss fight called the Corrupted Custodian. Nothing difficult or gimmicky here, just straight up one-on-one combat. Anyway, it's dead. That corruption was a bit concerning, wasn't it? The two feel the same, but ultimately Death thinks that the purity from the other 2 stones will cleanse this one, and it shouldn't really be an issue. The Guardian awakens and we quickly see how wrong we were. It takes off into the distance, but obviously it shouldn't be too hard to track. We head back to the open area just outside the main hub. There we find the Elder attempting to bring the Guardian back to its senses. He gets crushed, but he's fine for now, trust me. He failed in his attempt, so now it's our turn. So this boss fight requires using Despair, our horse. The mechanics aren't too difficult, but it is a pretty fun boss fight in my opinion. The boss slams his hammer, and when doing so, we shoot some of the corrupted balls on his arm. This effectively knocks him down, giving us a chance to hit his weak spots. Eventually, we break off one arm, leading to phase 2. This time around, he shoots these massive explosive balls at us, and we need to weaken them enough so that they explode near him. This will drop him, allowing us to strike the crystal on his head. This makes him fall apart and basically die, I guess. The Elder restores him back to his pure form, costing him his own life in the process.
Finds my very purpose, as the reaping of souls defines your own. There is no escaping it.
Pretty sad. The Guardian blasts the living hell out of this giant corruptive eye, and now we have a route to get to the Tree of Life. The tree sort of serves as a way to access different regions, so we'll be coming here often. Death approaches the giant door and finds himself being pulled into what I think is the Abyss. In it, we speak to this guy, and we don't know who he is yet, but he doesn't look really friendly. We tell him we want to restore humanity, and he gives us a whole monologue about how the weak humans deserved it and so on. But he's also a Nephilim, and one that Death slaughtered during their campaign in Eden as part of their service to the Charred Council, so these two actually have some history. Eventually, he reveals his name, Absalom, which he dropped to go under a new name. Now he's only known as Corruption. What a badass. He's corrupted the Tree of Life and is attempting to spread over the entire world. So we get a bit of backstory here. Eden was basically built for the kingdom of man. It belonged to humans, but the Nephilim wanted it, and if they took it, well, it would disrupt the precious balance. Death had to slay the Nephilim to keep this balance, and doing so earned him a new nickname, going as the Kinslayer. The day we killed Absalom in Eden was the day corruption was born. Essentially, Death was the cause of all this, sort of indirectly, I guess. We come to another realm, the kingdom of the dead. We speak to this dude with horns who tells us that the Tree of Life has taken Death here of all places, and it brought him here for a purpose, not just randomly. Word spreads fast, and it turns out this guy also heard about how war rode without any call being made for it, and mankind paid the price. Anyway, he tells us that the tree is only a gateway and that what we really seek is the Well of Souls. The well is responsible for channeling the dead into this kingdom we happen to be standing in, and it's also responsible for bringing souls back to creation. Eventually, we learn his name, Ostagoth. His people have been long extinct, and now he only serves as a merchant that also collects relics from his own people. Anyway, he tells us we need to scale this area called Serpent's Peak and summon something called the Eternal Throne so we can talk to the Lord of Bones. He'll eventually guide us to the well. You still with me here? Thus begins our journey in the Kingdom of Dead. As you might expect, we'll be killing a ton of skeletons in this region. Also, side note, I love how the eyes of the skulls light up when you approach a door in this area. Anyway, time to scale the peak. This area, like every other, has a ton of puzzles and traversal mechanics to put into use. We eventually make it to Serpent's Peak, and we slice this bell in half for some reason instead of just ringing it. Death always just has to go the extra mile. This giant floating boat appears led by 2 serpents. What a cool looking moment. For some reason, the game's performance dropped to sub 30 frames per second once I jumped onto the boat. It was so bad that I couldn't even effectively jump and climb around. I had to completely restart the game. There we go, much better. Now this section is actually pretty cool. You're climbing up and up while floating in the sky. I loved every moment of this. Anyway, we make it to the Eternal Throne, and here we seek an audience with the Lord of Bones. But first, we need to talk to his Chancellor. The Chancellor tells us that it's not possible to speak with the Lord unless we draw him out of his slumber. The only way to do that is to take part in the Gilded Arena. Defeating its champion will earn us an audience with the Lord of Bones. So, to the arena we go, I guess. Look at this cool little moment. We make it to the arena and have a short conversation with these three statues. We tell them we want to fight their champion, but as you might have guessed, we need to summon this champion. And to do so, we need to find 3 animus stones. It's always 3, isn't it? So these stones are tucked away deep in these dungeons. We have to fight our way to get through to them. There's also a new puzzle mechanic introduced where these glowing lanterns need to be placed in these statues and rotated so that the beam of light activates a stone on any locked door. We have our sights set on the first stone. Grabbing a stone triggers a combat in each of these sections. For your sake and my own, we'll fast forward to the 3rd stone. And boom, it's in place. This ends up summoning the arena's champion, who goes by Nasher with a G. It's a giant worm whose attacks must be dodged as it pops out of the sand, or I guess ash in this case. You can use the death grip to hit its eye and deal out some damage. This, however, is only the fake Nasher. The real one appears in phase 2. Now he's this giant skeleton beast thing that hits for some really big damage. Thankfully, I got my skeletons by my side, and all the upgrades I've been putting into them have been making them more annoying than ever. The champion is dead. For our efforts, we get the Chaos Fang, a new weapon to wield. This goes into the primary category, so we'll be using it right away. Anyway, back to the Chancellor to let him know that their champion is dead. He can't seem to believe that we actually killed the champ, but he upholds his end of the bargain and we get to meet the king. He wakes up and he's not too happy. Billions of souls have crowded his kingdom, specifically the human souls, all who are seeking vengeance. We ask for directions to the Well of Souls, but you're not gonna believe this. Are you ready? Well, the Lord of Bones cannot handle all these souls on his own. He needs help from 3 lords who have seemed to ghosted him when he needed them most. It's our goal to bring these lords back to the king, and by doing so, he will help us get to the Well of Souls. Yeah, if it feels like 90% of this game is just filler quests, you'd be right. But hey, at least it's fun, I guess. The king gives us a new power to command the dead lords that he wants back. This power is called Interdiction. We'll be using it soon enough. I ask for a bit more information about War. He tells us and pretty much confirms what we already know from the first game. The 7th seal wasn't broken, but War was punished and his soul made its way through the realm of the dead and is sort of just hanging out in the abyss until the Charred Council deals with them. This is some great information in understanding where we are in terms of the parallel stories. War still isn't actively seeking any vengeance at this moment. He's no more than a prisoner. Anyway, off to the first lord, the Farseer. I think that's how you say his name. Each lord has their own mini dungeon that includes different puzzles and combat encounters. In this dungeon, we get introduced to a new enemy type, the Wraith. Pretty easy to kill, especially now considering my gauntlets freeze an enemy, and when they're frozen, I deal more damage to them. It's pretty OP. We won't spend too much time on this dungeon. Let's go and meet the Farseer face to face. There he is in all his green glory. This fight in particular isn't too crazy. I like when fights are just straight up melee fests rather than some mechanic or gimmick that's needed. Also, I get to see my skeletons in all their glory. Down goes the first dead lord. Now we get to use Interdiction. Remember that power that the Lord of Bones gave us? Basically, we can summon the dead lord and have them help us with puzzles and combat, which is pretty cool. Let's go find the second dead lord, shall we? Look how cool this area looks from a distance. The second dead lord is the Judicator. The Judicator, it's like a legit judge. You're not going to believe this, but in order to actually get this guy to come with us, we need to bring him 3 wandering spirits within this dungeon. After some puzzling, we meet the first soul. Apparently, it's this skeletal champion. We bring the soul back to the Judicator, and he does his thing. On the way to the second soul, we come across the Tormentor, a short boss fight that's fairly easy to deal with. We free the second soul and the third. Of course, exiting the arena of the third soul leads to another boss fight. This one's pretty unique, but in the end, it's not too difficult. All we need to do is shoot the hanging skeleton, but what makes this tricky is the horde of skeletons trying to kill me in the process. But he's dead. By the way, we're not done yet because he comes back in this form of a bone giant, but we take care of him too. What's important here is that we get our first possessed weapon. This is actually a pretty cool feature that the game has. Essentially, possessed weapons can be customized and you can personally choose which stats and upgrades you get by sacrificing other pieces of equipment. Each time you hit a level, you choose an upgrade. It's pretty cool. Back to the Judicator with the final soul. No boss fight this time, he sort of just tags along with us. We get interrupted by the last Lord of the Dead, who tells us to head back to the Gilded Arena and ask for the Psychomerin. I don't even know what that is right now, so off we go, I guess. We tell the 3 statues what we're looking for, and they open a portal up to which Death decides to Swanton bomb into. So the Psychomerin just starts out with a big combat section against 2 stalkers. There's also a bunch of puzzle solving. Essentially what it is just another dungeon, and we need to use both lords here as part of the puzzle mechanics. Within this dungeon, we meet the 3rd Dead Lord, Basilius. A pretty fun fight that requires some good dodge timing. Fighting him isn't a solo fight, however, eventually he calls out this massive spider that he mounts and commands to attack us. Eventually, we kill the giant spider by slicing its head off. And the last Dead Lord is now in our command. Let's go ahead and head back to the Lord of Bones. We walk in with the Dead Lords flanking us, and they're ready to serve the Lord of Bones once again. The king, however, decides to burn them all, telling them he no longer has use for them. Essentially, this guy just sent us on a 2-hour-long quest to bring him people he just wants to kill. The Lord, however, expresses his gratitude and tells us who to go to learn more about the Well of Souls. We do also get a new ability, the Soul Splitter. This lets Death take on 2 different forms that help with puzzle solving. The Lord sends us to the City of the Dead, where we will finally find out how to get to the Well of Souls. The Chancellor follows us here, but he doesn't help at all, so I'm not sure why he came here to begin with. We kind of just need to explore and find out who to talk to ourselves. Early on, we get a look at what the Soul Splitter ability looks like, with a very easy starting puzzle, but as you might expect, they increase in complexity. We complete some puzzles and beat the hell out of some bad guys. We finally make it to what seems like the boss of this area, a giant tentacle-faced monster called the Wailing Host. His swings are wide and they definitely hurt, but can be easily dodged. Hitting his hands and his face are the main ways to deal damage. In the second half, his real face is exposed. He's very ugly, by the way, but we just continue the same thing we've already been doing. And he's dead. We go through the doorway and meet the one who we seek, the Crowfather. Yeah, the same dude from the very beginning. Why couldn't he just tell me I needed to get to the Well of Souls from the start? Anyway, he tells us that the well has a key that was divided long ago. The angels keep one half and the demons keep the other. The 2 halves should never meet. This sounds like a warning, but we're trying to save war here, so I guess it doesn't really matter much to us. He tells us to seek the tree out once more, and that it'll take us where we need to go. We asked the Crowfather about Absalom, the dude who we killed in Eden that started the corruption. His goal through this corruption is to destroy all of creation and balance as a whole. We also learned that something is drawing power from the Well of Souls, and now we know from Darksiders 1 that that something is the Destroyer. However, that's not clear to Death or the Crowfather here. The Crowfather mentions to us that the souls of the Nephilim, which are embedded in our chest at this point, would be enough power to restore the well. We'd need to sacrifice their souls to bring back humanity. It's kind of ironic how Death wants to bring back all of humanity back to life, but now we know what must get done. Get the 2 keys for the Well of Souls and sacrifice the souls of the Nephilim. Back to the Tree of Death we go. So this first portal takes us to a new location called Lost Light. Lost Light belongs to the angels and also where they've hidden their key. Definitely a different vibe here when coming from the Kingdom of the Dead. I kind of like it. This first location we come to is called the Crystal Spire, and here we fight angels for the first time. They're not normal angels though, clearly they're dealing with some corruption. During this fight, we get help from an NPC named Nathaniel. Apparently, he was there at Eden when Death was on his little killing spree. This guy's not really into Hellguard, but instead he guards the light and someone named the Archon. We ask about the key, but we're just redirected to go and talk to the Archon, so that's where we're headed. Well, there's the Archon in all his glory. We politely ask for the key, but he tells us that he won't part with it since the corruption is spreading within the realm. The Archon tells us that in order to reverse what has happened here, he needs a divine relic called the Rod of Arafel. However, he can't go get it himself because if an angel visits Earth, the gates to the White City, which is home to the angels, will close for him. So guess who's going to Earth? If we get the rod, he'll clear the route to the Citadel where the key apparently lives. Sounds like a deal, I guess. Earth is absolutely cooked. It's pretty much in the same condition that War finds it in sometime later. The Hellsguard is here though, and so is Uriel. Remember her? Anyway, we need to help defend against this huge swarm of zombies that is rushing us. The Earth section of this game is wild, and you'll get to see soon why. Remember those sections in Darksiders 1 where we had to use a little machine gun? Well, we get to do that here once again, and without it, this section and pretty much the whole Earth level would be far too difficult. After clearing the swarm, we speak with Uriel, we ask about the rod, and we learn that this was a weapon brought by an Archon to fight demons in the End War, but that Archon had fell in battle and the weapon was shattered. The Destroyer now uses its pieces to fuel his army. Uriel tells us that in order to find the pieces of the rod, we just need to follow the trail of corpses. That sounds easy enough, I guess. But guess how many pieces of the rod has shattered into? If you said 3, congratulations. You're correct. So like I said, this whole level requires using this machine gun to clear enemies, both big and small. We'll clear out section after section, and we'll be doing this for a while. So let's fast forward and grab these rod pieces. First, we get the staff, and on our way to the second piece, we run into a boss. A very easy fight considering we have this machine gun. And the second piece is ours. Just one more to go, and there it is. All 3 pieces coming together to form the Rod of Arafel. We have one last conversation with Uriel before heading back. She tells us that War must pay for his crimes, and that if she ever comes across him, he will pay. Well, we saw how that went in Darksiders 1, so I don't know about all that. Back to the Archon we go, we give him the rod, and he does his thing, clearing all the corruption and darkness that is spread within his realm. He also gives us a mount to hop on and head to the Citadel. This guy's being super helpful. There, we'll need to seek out a scribe who I guess has the key. In the Citadel, we have some new puzzle mechanics, these beams of light which power each other to clear up the corruption. The water here in the Citadel is poisoned and we need to purify it. Thus begins one of the longest dungeons that this game has to offer. What's important here is that we get another puzzle and traversal mechanic, the Voidwalker ability. This lets us shoot portals onto these blue circles. We saw this same mechanic in Darksiders 1. It works exactly the same here. So yeah, we got some water to purify, but first we have a new enemy to take on. The Aphid, just another corrupted angel, but a lot harder to kill. So we purify one of the water things using all our new abilities, but there is 2 more, and boom, 1 more to go, and that's 3. The water flowing looks much better now. Eventually this opens up a room to the scribe that we needed to find, but he's not looking too good. He's also pretty damn corrupted. This is one of the more challenging fights in my opinion. He has a variety of quick and range attacks that hit pretty hard. The second phase of this fight requires some real precision timing with a Voidwalker ability to put him down, and it did take me a few attempts, but there's only one other fight that took me many, and I mean many more attempts than this. Anyway, we defeat the scribe and demand to know where the key is. The scribe tells us that the Archon is actually corrupt. He's been colluding or something. He looked into some pool and the vision he saw within it basically corrupted him. He slaughtered many in the Citadel and fled to the Crystal Spire, so back we go, I guess. I think the Archon may have assumed that we'd die here, but unfortunately for him, we're going back. So back at the Archon, and we get a better idea of what this pool he's looking into is. Seems like he's been in direct contact or under influence of the Destroyer, so that kind of explains his behavior. We demand the key, but he's not willing to give it up, so we fight. This is one of the cooler boss fights this game has to offer. The Archon has a lot of different moves, and at one point he enters the state where he can't be hit. I wasn't aware, but when he does this, we need to death grip onto him. This fight is only one phase, and I managed to use my skeletons to dish out some big damage. Killing the Archon, we get the Angel's Key, but we still need the demon side, so back to the Tree of Life. The Crowfather opens up the path to the Demon Key. That was very nice of him. This place is called Shadow's Edge, and it's a reflection of the Crystal Spire. Thankfully, we won't need to purify any water here, but damn, this looks good. Ostagoth is here, and he tells us that Samael keeps many treasures in the vaults of the Black Stone, or in other words, the throne of Samael. Corruption has even spread here. In this region, we're actually looking for the Mad Queen, Lilith. And here she is. Lilith claims that she was hiding from Death because no one is safe when he's around, including his own mother, who in this case, Lilith claims to be his mom, basically. Death denies this, but she reminds Death that she created Absalom from the dust of an angel and demon, and from that, she created the rest of the Nephilim. We're reminded again that the horsemen slaughtered the Nephilim, but we learned that only Death showed any remorse towards doing that, seeing as he did not cast the amulet containing all their souls into the abyss as the council had ordered. Anyway, we're here for the demon key. Lilith tells us that it's in Samael's keep, but he's gone and the key has vanished. Thankfully, Lilith gives us a new power, one where we can travel back in time where Samael was still here and the demon key was as well. For this gift, she asks that once we reach the Well of Souls, we decide to resurrect the Nephilim. But we'll see about all that. This new ability is called the Phase Walker, and we'll be using it a lot in the next dungeon. Anyway, I was clearing out this combat encounter and this freaking enemy got stuck behind the gate, and I had to restart the game and redo this whole battle sequence. Let's speed things up a bit, shall we? There's a lot of puzzle solving here that takes quite a bit of time. The Phase Walker ability allows us to enter portals that shows us rooms in different time periods. Specifically, here we see it when Samael was still around and after corruption had taken over. Anyway, we run into Samael in the past. He's chilling on his throne and sort of taunting Death, wondering why he's here if the council never told him to be here. Death politely asks for the key, and Samael kindly hands it over. Just kidding, he throws Death around and tells him that Absalom was stronger than Death will ever be. Well, time to fight Samael. Remember earlier I said there was a fight that took me forever? Well, this is the one. It took me a while to understand Samael's attack pattern, and the two phases take a while to get to. Phase 2 is harder because he ends up moving so much faster, and this attack where he creates fire from the floor is just a bit finicky to dodge. It's a fight that tested my abilities and my patience. Eventually we beat him and he straight up just gives us the key. We head back to the Crowfather and let him know that we have the keys. Now we can finally enter the Well of Souls. This is basically the point of no return. The Crowfather tells us that within the well we will find the source of corruption and that corruption has chosen its champion. You can go ahead and take a guess of who that might be. We open the door and in we go. The Well of Souls. Finally. So who is this champion we should be afraid of? Well, it's Absalom, the dude we betrayed way back in Eden. He goes by the Avatar of Chaos now, I guess. Strangely, I found this fight far easier than the Samael fight. His attacks are pretty predictable and easily dodgeable. I don't think I took more than 2 attempts to bring him down. Look at my skeletons go, man. So proud of what they've become. Anyway, we defeat him, and Death has himself a little monologue. Absalom is dead, and so too is corruption with him. The Crowfather shows up and tells Death what he needs to do. Either return the kingdom of man and restore balance, or resurrect the Nephilim like Lilith requested. Death clearly loves his brother War, so he chooses to bring back humanity by throwing him and all the Nephilim souls into the well. We get one final cutscene though, reminding us that War did break the 7th seal, and that this is not the end of Death's story, but just the end of Darksiders 2. What a fun journey, right? Well, it's too bad we need to start Darksiders 3, because honestly, it was a bit tough to get through. Well, that's 2 games down. We got 1 more to go in this trilogy, Darksiders 3. I wish I could say I like this game as much as the other 2, but I can't. Regardless, I played it from start to finish for the sake of completion. Darksiders 3 switches up the formula heavily from the previous 2 titles. Instead of a hack and slash action-adventure game, we get a Souls-like and honestly not a very good one. Regardless, I was pretty immersed in the story and the world of Darksiders at this point, and I was very excited to get started on Darksiders 3. So here we go. The game had the most difficulty options I think I've ever seen a game offer. Like, how are there 5 different difficulties for this game? Anyway, I went with balanced, and I was really glad I did by the end of it. There are also 2 combat modes, one that the game was originally made with, and a classic mode which I think was added with an update to resemble the older titles in this series. There's also the Nightmare mode, which deletes your save file if you die. Anyway, let's get started, shall we? Darksiders 3 opens up with a theoretical question. Why did the creator construct a universe filled with such imperfections, such as misery and sin? This question among heaven and hell is known as the Riddle of Sorrows. We get some backstory that we're already familiar with, so we won't spend too long here. The Nephilim are spawns of demons and angels, and they were betrayed by 4 among their own, who are known as the 4 horsemen. By now, I think this is drilled into your brain. There's a nice little intro to each of the horsemen, but Fury cuts her intro short, playing into exactly why I guess she's known as Fury. Now, Fury's story is yet to be written, and we move forward to a scene where she's just hanging out in some desert wasteland. Her personality is very brash, and she's pretty impatient, waiting for something to happen.
If I didn't love you so much, I'd kill you just for something to do.
Well, it's not long before she hears the call, though it's not the call she thinks it is. Instead, she appears in front of the council. Next to her is War, and he's in prison, so now we know exactly where this game takes place in the timeline as well. Death and Fury both play their stories out while War is imprisoned within the Charred Council's domain, and humanity has been obliterated. So what is the reason Fury was called to the council? Well, the Charred Council tells her that the 7 deadly sins have been released. They roam Earth and are free from the council's prison. The 7 pose a direct threat to the order and balance that the council holds in such high regard, hence why we need to go and find them as soon as possible. Fury lets the council know that she can handle the mission on her own, and in return she wants to be named leader of the Horsemen. The council tells her to get started, but also attaches a watcher to her for some reason, the same way War had one when he returned. Anyway, we need to head to a location called Haven. This is where our hunt for the 7 begins. Before we go, War tells us to watch out as there seems to be forces conspiring against the Horsemen. Well, that's the setup. Let's talk about the gameplay. Darksiders 3 is a Souls-like. Enemies hit hard, and the ones that you kill drop souls as currency, which you'll spend to level up your health, physical, or arcane damage. You start with one weapon, a whip, but as time goes on, you get new ones. Combat is very dodge heavy, but on balance, it never felt too difficult. There are a number of combos to pull off, but honestly, I never really dug too deep into the combo system. Anyway, we're on Earth, and here we're looking for the first of the 7 deadly sins. It's not long before we run into one either. This is Envy. We get a short introduction here, but in all honesty, the lore in this particular game isn't as dense or as in-depth as the previous 2 titles. Fury isn't on a mission related to the other Horsemen. She's not trying to save War or work with Death or Strife. Instead, her journey is more personal, so it's less all-encompassing or meta, if that makes sense. Envy is this weird bird-like creature with a really annoying voice.
They are apes crawling through dirt.
But the fight itself isn't too difficult. Like many Souls-likes, once you learn the attack patterns of a boss, you can kinda go on autopilot. It's no different here. One phase in this fight requires us to climb up and swing using our whip. This is done to knock Envy out of the sky and avoid a big damage attack. Anyway, we defeat Envy and take this talisman off its neck. This is what we're going to use to collect each of the other 7 deadly sins, starting with Envy. But is this the real Envy? Well, I'm not too sure yet. The Watcher mentions that there's an energy emanating from the talisman. This energy points us to the direction of where the next of the 7 deadly is. Basically, the compass at the top of our screen will always point to the next sin. We take a short stroll here and get an update on the status of everything. The Watcher lets us know that the state of the Earth is an exact representation of the struggle between order and chaos. We're kind of just in the middle of it, trying to find and contain each sin. The actual game world and mission structure is far different from the other games as well. Instead of entering dungeons and doing a bunch of puzzles or clearing combat encounters, it's all just integrated in the world itself. Like other Souls-likes, there are shortcuts to unlock and areas that serve as checkpoints. We'll be coming to our first one pretty shortly. You might recognize who the person is too. There are also larger enemies like this dude who guards an upgrade material or enhancements that we can place into our weapons. These enhancements augment the damage of our weapon among other properties. During our trip, we come across this large tree, but this isn't a normal tree. No, this is a maker's tree. Remember those guys from Darksiders 2? Well, they're here too somehow. We make it to our first checkpoint and look who it is. Good old Volgrim. Unfortunately, he's not the merchant he once was. Instead, he's a firekeeper for the most part. We come to him, we bring him souls. For this, we can level up. We can buy different consumables and items from him, but honestly, I never really bothered with all that. I mostly used all my souls on leveling. We finally make it to the Maker's Tree, and in it, we find what might be a familiar face if you've been paying attention. Yep, that's Ulthane from Darksiders 1, the Black Hammer himself. He's much different in this game, less abrasive, less loud, not as funny, and he acts like more of a protector of the remaining human rather than the blacksmith who likes to kill for fun. Anyway, Fury doesn't really like humans. She doesn't care for whatever happens to them. She's not here to protect them. One of the humans, who goes by Jones, confronts Fury for some reason and gives some rousing speech, questioning Fury and her purpose. Yeah, I'd rather the games not have humans, but here we are. Anyway, Ulthane asks if we can help protect the humans, and in exchange, he'll provide his services of upgrading our weapons and enhancements. Ulthane gives us an item called the Bridge. We'll use this item whenever we see a human out and about in the world, and they can be teleported to this safe location. For our commitment to help, Ulthane tells us where Wrath can be found, which is basically somewhere beneath the city. So, off we go. One thing that I felt like this game lost was the outstanding and beautiful environments that Darksiders 2 had. This game is far more brown and drab. It's not as interesting to explore and not much to look at, honestly. Come across our first human and send them back to Haven. We find ourselves underground in a subway system. Here we have to use a mechanic that is unique to this game. These bugs like to eat nearby sources of food, such as red lava or whatever this is. Picking up the bug after it consumes it makes it explosive for some reason, allowing us to clear nearby webbing. In this subway, we see in the distance another of the deadly sins. Sloth. He's kind of just chilling over there, and it's going to be a bit before we even fight him, so let's remain focused on getting to Wrath. Well, here he is, fighting Angels of the Hellguard. Our fight is one-on-one, but mechanically it's pretty simple. Like many fights in this game, it's all about pattern recognition. It does hurt when this guy hits, but I had enough heals to outlast his damage. I pulled out my Havoc form just to secure the kill. Anyway, he's basically dead, and for some strange reason, Fury calls on her horse. I don't know why. I didn't even know we had that ability to do this yet, but it turns out her horse has a sword driven through its side. How did this even happen? I have no clue. But the sword clearly belongs to an angel. Wrath gets up and stabs Fury, telling her that everyone refers to her as the dumb one of the horsemen, which honestly was kind of funny. I'm not sure how she's not dead, but then she stabs herself again to do a backflip and stab Wrath in the head. I honestly have no idea what's going on. Somehow, Fury realizes that War was right, that there are forces conspiring against the Horsemen. I don't know how she came to realize that in this very moment, I'm not gonna lie, but she does get ported to another location, and in it, she sees an angel and demon speaking to the Lord of Hollows. This guy apparently allows people to go hollow so they no longer have to fight in this Everwar. I'm not entirely sure why we ended up with the Lord of Hollows, but the Watcher makes an appearance which causes him to call out Fury for just being another puppet of the Council. He randomly spawns some enemies for us to kill, which we do with ease, and apparently this was enough to prove ourselves. He grants us a new power called the Flame Hollow. This will help us traverse the environment and unlock shortcuts that were once covered in webs. We also gain the Flame Hollow weapon, which are like these two dagger looking things. He tells us we'll need to deal with this guy named Abraxas. This person threatens the balance, and for that the Lord of Hollow wants his soul. He's not actually part of the main story, only a side boss, so I'll kill him if I come across him. Anyway, the Flame Hollow lets us walk through lava and get a handy flame jump which shoots us high into the air to grab ledges that are pretty high up. This is one of the nicer looking areas of the game, but it's not really saying much. We seem to be in some catacomb-like level as we make our way back up to the surface. I come across this side boss called the Flame Warden. It took me a bit to actually kill him. I found him to be way harder than some of the main bosses that this game has to offer. I finally kill him, and for the efforts, I get a new essence and an artifact. The artifact will be used to level up my weapons with Ulthane. Right now, our goal isn't down here. In fact, we don't even have the correct abilities to get through this area. I was pretty lost here, so I did have to consult a guide on what my next move should be since it's not exactly obvious. Our next goal is to kill Sloth. Remember that boss we saw sitting in the distance that we couldn't reach? Well, now he's our target. I level up my weapons a bit with Ulthane and then head on my way. Getting there is pretty roundabout, and on my journey I kill a ton of enemies and pull a bunch of levers. The damage over time Flame Hollow ability is pretty nice. We finally find the Sloth, and in his opening scene, he tries to convince Fury to relax, take a load off, and seek comfort. I'm not gonna lie, this scene is particularly bad. Like, what is even going on here? Fury comes to her senses, and the boss battle begins. This fight requires killing the crabs that are carrying the Sloth's throne. Once that's done, the real fight begins. I died a couple of times because I was being too impatient. His swings are wide and pretty damn quick for someone called Sloth. Using my Flame Hollow ability, I was able to use the damage over time effectively and kill the third deadly sin. Completing this fight transports us back to the Lord of Hollows. I'm not sure why his role in this game is to be like Fury's life coach or something. Like, he tells us he saw the battle with Sloth and proved that we won't succumb to comforts before the mission is complete. What? Anyway, he rewards us with another power, the Storm Hollow. This lets us float around and use a spear, which is not bad at all. So what's next, you ask? Well, I asked the same question. I once again had to consult a guide because honestly, it was kind of confusing. I went back to the one area that I had no ability to get through. This time with our Flame Hollow, we're able to get this bridge built. This area reveals one of the larger puzzle areas in this game, but honestly, the puzzles in this game are pretty rudimentary compared to what I went through in the first two games, especially Darksiders 1. Kind of missed the harder puzzles, but here we are. Right now, we need to find the location of the next deadly sin. Eventually, we make it out of the catacomb area and run into these new enemies. They're like tiny hobbits or something. I have no idea how to describe them. We eventually make it to the worst part of the game. I have no idea who was in charge of the level design here, but my god, I hope they never touched another level. Basically, these little hobbits are everywhere, but now they can throw bombs at us, and there are also a bunch of tripwires everywhere. Bro, who designed this, and why? I couldn't wait to leave this place. Thankfully, the next sin is not far. This one is called Greed. He's a hoarder, as you might expect. Honestly, this was a pretty cool boss fight and one of the game's best. Very creative arena and boss abilities. He jumps on these towers of junk and throws objects at us and eventually grabs a bathtub and wields it like a great hammer or something. I like this fight, though it only took me about 2 attempts. That's another sin down. Alright, let's head back up to the surface. So glad that section is done. The surface is absolutely filled with enemies blocking our way, so we deal with them the only way we know how. We eventually make it to a church. Here we run into another one of the sins, Pride. Pride looks kind of badass. She reminds me of a Valkyrie from God of War. We can't fight her yet, we're beneath her, literally. She tells us that when she's the only sin left, she'll fight us. There's no rhyme or reason to any of this, but here we are. I decided to pay Olflin a visit at this point, and we've returned so many humans back to Haven, he gave us a little prize, and I also do some enhancement upgrading. Okay, so I lost a bit of footage here, but honestly, it's fine. You really didn't miss anything. To sum it up, we can now use these giant squids to get across higher ledges for some reason. And in this new area, we saw what is basically an angelic outpost which we plan to go to. Remember, Fury still believes that the Hellguard was responsible for killing her horse. Not sure anyone watching remembers that at this point, but I don't blame you at all. We walk into the outpost and they're kind of waiting for me, so this is our first combat encounter against these angels. As part of it, we fight an angelic champion. He's more of a mini-boss more than anything. Eventually, this guy named Lucille shows up. He asks if we're here to finish what war started. Fury is pissed because her horse was killed, and Lucille mentions that there's no way his forces had the ability to do that, or why would they even betray a horseman given the current circumstances that they're in. He mentions that we can probably strike a deal, and this deal is centered around the next sin. Lust. Lucille believes that an unnamed demon has granted Lust power to transform both angels and demons into undead, leading to further destruction. We do this for him, and I guess we get some information from Lucille regarding who attempted to kill Fury back at the fight with Wrath. He also randomly gives us a crossblade. Not complaining, I'll take it. As you might expect, this crossblade is used both for puzzle solving and just dishing out some damage. It's a bit finicky to use, but it gets the job done. We can use a certain hollow like flame or shock to imbue the crossblade with that element. This helps us clear webbing on distant objects, for instance. Alright, we need to find Lust. There are many enemies and puzzles standing in our way, but I won't put you through that. On our way to Lust, we do get grabbed by this giant creature. I thought this was going to be like a mini boss fight, but we literally just need to hit it in the eyes and run away. Yeah. Anyway, back to our hunt. And there goes Lust sitting on a throne in the middle of the swamp. Lust has a really long monologue. They try to play into Fury's deepest desires, like being the leader of the horsemen. This makes Fury see a vision of her brothers. In it, the other horsemen tell her that the council has made her the leader of the group and that they need to go and unseat the leaders from both heaven and hell. It takes a while, but Fury finally sees through all this and doesn't give in to the lust for power, I suppose. This fight is pretty rudimentary until the second phase where Lucille shows up. He comes in wanting to fight Lust with us, but quite literally falls into temptation in like 2 seconds, turning him against us. Now it's 2-on-1, but I made sure to continue focusing on Lust. This will end the fight no matter what. So we take down Lust and he tries one more time to convince us not to kill him, but it's too late, buddy. We let Lucille live, forgiving him for falling into temptation. For our act of kindness, he tells us that if he learns anything about the plot against us, he'll let us know. Fury has some kind of awakening here, I guess. Lust showed her what she can become and wanted no part of that. So now she's on a journey of self-discovery. Anyway, back to the Lord of Hollows again. He can't be any more proud for some reason. I generally don't understand the story at times. We get another power, the Force Hollow. This lets us sink in water and swing a giant hammer to move objects around. It also will help us in traversal later on, like turning into this giant ball. Honestly, does this make any sense? Like, why? I feel like I'm being too hard on this game at times, but what on earth is the point of turning into a ball of crystals to get around? Our next target is Gluttony, and I'm not gonna lie, this has to be one of the worst designed boss fights I've ever had the displeasure of experiencing. To get to him, we need to use our Force Hollow to freely move underwater. Pretty cool ability, not gonna lie. We do some puzzle solving and some wall writing. I'll skip a bunch here just so we can get to the next boss. This video is already running longer than I ever anticipated. We make it to the next boss and he tempts us with a platter of food. I guess that didn't work. The gluttony fight is in 2 phases. The first one makes sense. It's not easy and caused me many deaths. I can respect that. The slam hurts and cannot be dodged, so you just need to move as far back as possible. This took me a bit to understand because I was always trying to dodge it. He also attacks by shooting these bombs into the sky and some closer melee attacks. I was able to advance through the first phase eventually, because as tough as it really wasn't the annoying one. The second phase is by far the dumbest boss fight I've ever experienced. Maybe I'm just being extra annoyed while writing the script, but seriously, it was just so bad. Basically, you need to dodge all of his attacks and have these bombs float around you. If they hit you, you take damage. That makes sense. But in order to damage the boss in this phase, you cannot strike him. You can't even swing here. Instead, you need to have a bomb follow you until the boss decides to do an attack where he tries to suck you in. When he does, you guide the bomb towards the air and hope he swallows it. This sounds simple, but getting him to do the sucking attack legitimately took me forever. I was never closer to losing my mind while playing this series until this very moment. I won't put you through the misery that I went through, so here's one bomb, and there's the other. Finally, he's dead. Back to the Lord of Hollows, who gives us another power called the Stasis Hollow, and also tells us that in our next encounter, only one of us will survive, which is pretty ominous. So the Stasis Hollow lets us walk on water and also grab onto these blue walls. This is just a new traversal ability, which is not bad at all. Okay, so what's left? Well, you probably wouldn't be able to tell because I sure wasn't, but Wrath actually isn't dead since we never took his soul or essence into our talisman. So yeah, we gotta go kill him. To find him, we gotta go through this desert-like area with a ton of machinery that we'll need to platform on and off, basically putting all our abilities to use. There's also this section where we're getting chased down by a freaking tornado. If we get caught, it's instant death. Anyway, we finally find Wrath again, and this dude's just like dominating in a makeshift gladiator arena. This fight is literally the same. I think he learned a new attack with his axes spinning around him, but that's pretty much it. Anyway, he's dead, for real this time. So remember when Pride said to come to her once the other 6 sins were dead? Well, now is that time. So we take the portal to her, and here we are. Pride attempts to make Fury an offer. She tries to coerce her into working alongside her, but I guess Fury is a changed person, so it doesn't work. In all honesty, this fight is also pretty solid. She really does remind me of a Valkyrie from God of War, even down to the boss fight itself. The second phase of this has this blue laser passing through, and getting hit by it hurts a lot. Either way, Pride is now dead, but she tells us that the council we've been working for is infected with Pride, and the whole idea of balance is just a farce. They're the ones who released the 7 sins from the prison, and without humanity, what role do the sins even play? Fury demands to know everything, and in this moment, the Watcher completely changes her vibe. See, the Watcher we've been tagging along with this whole time is actually one of the deadly sins, envy. But we killed envy already, didn't we? Well, no, that was a fake one, I guess. Envy steals the amulet from Fury, and Fury realizes that everything was true. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not sure what everything she refers to here, but the talisman is a big problem. Turns out Envy and Fury had a mutual benefactor, the Lord of Hollows. With his guidance and attempt to build up Fury into someone who can save humanity, he was unknowingly also building up the power Envy would eventually steal. Envy tells us that the Charred Council actually wants the Horsemen dead, including the 7 deadly sins, so Envy wants to pay a visit to the council and kill them. Fury goes down some massive hole and somehow ends up back at Haven. Jones is here, remember this guy from the beginning of the game? He gives Fury a speech of motivation. I'm not gonna lie, this was hard to watch. Why does a horseman need a pep talk? Death and war would never. The overarching story of Fury's growth wouldn't be so bad if it was just handled better. But anyway, we talk to Ulthane, and he opens up a portal to the Charred Council where we'll also likely find Envy. So yeah, Envy is here, fighting the Charred Council and telling them her plans of conquering Earth. Fury shows up and is pissed. The council demands that she kills Envy, but honestly, the council has lost all respect at this point. The fight against Envy is interesting. She summons all of the other 6 sins movesets throughout the fight. Envy is also really fast and hits pretty hard. Eventually, I kill Envy and we get this unbelievably cringe line.
For the horsemen!
Now the council is still pissed at Fury for overstepping her boundaries. The council just continues to be mad at everything. They plan on punishing her alongside War, so they try to fry her with 3 beams, and she just throws up a talisman which causes a giant shockwave and subsequently causes the whole damn place to collapse, I think. Back on Earth, the humans and the Makers are fighting back against some invasion. Fury emerges, letting Ulthane know that the Council is likely planning an attack on Haven, and that along with Heaven and Hell, they want the Kingdom of Man gone. Fury gives a speech to the humans telling them that with hope, they can win the war. Yeah, we're a long way from the first 2 games, aren't we? The Destroyer shows up and demands his army to attack. Ulthane sends the humans through a portal, and Fury is designated as their protector going forward. Fury tells Ulthane that War is innocent of his crimes should he ever encounter him in the future, to assist him with whatever he needs. Anyway, it's implied that Jones is actually one of the Horsemen, specifically Strife. Fury portals out, and we do get one after credits scene. Lilith is talking to someone in the darkness. She mentions that Abaddon, or the Destroyer, rules over Earth and that the Council works against the balance they vow to protect. The voice tells Lilith that soon corruption will take over, which I can only assume is a call out to Darksiders 2. And yeah, that's it. That's the trilogy, I guess. Honestly, I really did enjoy my time with Darksiders 1 and 2. I felt like they were legitimately fun action-adventure games, and I loved the changes the second title brought to the series. It felt like a much more grand experience, while Darksiders 1 felt more focused, and that's not a bad thing at all. Darksiders 3 to me was such a letdown. Going into this video, I knew the game didn't review that well compared to the other titles, but honestly, I didn't expect it to be as bad as it ended up being. Anyway, that's the video. We played through the Darksiders trilogy. If there's any other franchises you guys want to see a playthrough of, let me know in the comments below. If you've made it this far, maybe even consider subscribing for more content like this. Thank you all for watching. As always, I will see you all in the next one.